The city was still quiet when Michael stepped out of his small apartment that morning. The streets looked almost empty, except for the early workers heading to their jobs. Michael carried a black briefcase in one hand and a steaming cup of coffee in the other. His shirt was neatly pressed, his tie carefully adjusted, and his shoes shined. Today was not just another workday, it was the most important day of his career. Michael worked for a growing company in downtown. After months of sleepless nights and long hours at his desk, his proposal had finally been accepted for presentation in front of the company's top board members. For him, this was not just a chance to prove his skills, but also a chance to secure a brighter future. He had promised himself that no matter what, he would arrive early to prepare. As he walked along the street, he noticed Karen, his neighbor from the same apartment block, standing outside her house. Karen was known for her strict nature. She often complained about noise, parking spaces, and even about people walking too close to her yard. She was always quick to raise her voice and report anything she thought was unusual. Karen's eyes followed Michael as he walked with his briefcase. She frowned, folded her arms, and spoke loudly across the street. "You're too early, Michael. Nobody is allowed in that building before time. What are you doing there?" Michael stopped for a moment, surprised at her words. He tried to keep his voice calm. "I just have some important work today, Karen. I'm going early to prepare." But Karen shook her head firmly. She didn't seem convinced. Her suspicious eyes remained fixed on him as though he was hiding something. The security guard at the company gate, an older man named Robert, recognized Michael immediately. Robert gave him a friendly nod and opened the door. Michael smiled politely and entered the lobby. For a moment, he thought the matter was settled. But when he glanced back, Karen was still standing there, holding her phone in her hand. Michael didn't think much of it and walked toward the elevator. But outside, Karen had already dialed a number. Her voice grew sharp and serious. "Hello, officer. Please come quickly. There's a man sneaking into the office building before hours." "Yes, I saw it with my own eyes. He looks suspicious, and I think he might be up to something." Inside the building, Michael sat down in the lobby to review his notes. His hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the papers. He wanted to focus on the big presentation, but Karen's loud words echoed in his memory, "He looks suspicious." Michael had never been in trouble before. He was a simple man who believed in hard work. But the thought of police arriving to question him made his chest tighten. What if they delayed him? What if the board misunderstood and thought he had done something wrong? His career could be ruined before it even began. 10 minutes later, the sharp sound of a siren broke the morning calm. A police car pulled up in front of the office. 2 uniformed officers stepped out, their expressions serious and alert. And right behind them walked Karen, her chin lifted proudly, as if she had saved the whole neighborhood from danger. "That's him," Karen said immediately, pointing at Michael through the glass doors. "That man right there. Arrest him now. He broke in before hours. I told you he looked suspicious." The officers entered the building. Their heavy boots echoed against the lobby floor. Michael stood up slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. "Officers, please, this is a misunderstanding. My name is Michael. I work here. I came early because today is my presentation. The guard here knows me." The security guard Robert quickly nodded. "Yes, he's telling the truth. He works here. He shows his ID every day." But Karen was not satisfied. She stepped closer, her finger still pointing. Check his briefcase. People like him always hide something. You can't just take his word. The officers turned to Michael. One of them spoke politely but firmly. Sir, we just need to take a look inside your briefcase. It's standard procedure. If you have nothing to hide, it'll only take a moment. Michael's heart pounded. He hesitated, not because he had anything wrong inside, but because the moment felt heavy, like his entire reputation rested on this. Slowly, he placed the briefcase on the table and opened the silver lock. The lid lifted, and the officers leaned forward to look. Karen's eyes followed quickly. She expected to see something dangerous, something she could later say she had prevented. But as soon as her eyes landed on the papers inside, her face changed completely. Her mouth opened slightly, and her proud stance collapsed. She froze in shock, her eyes wide as though she had just seen something she never expected. The entire lobby went silent as Michael opened his briefcase. The silver lock clicked, and the lid rose slowly. Inside were neat stacks of papers, carefully organized files, and a few charts rolled up tightly. At the top lay a folder with bold letters, Board Presentation, Future Expansion Plan. The officers leaned in, scanning the documents. It was clear nothing dangerous was inside. They exchanged quick glances, their tense expressions softening. One of the officers nodded. Looks like work material, he said calmly. But all eyes quickly turned toward Karen. Her face, which moments ago had been full of pride, was now pale with embarrassment. She had expected to be proven right, but instead, the truth stood against her. Michael was just a hard-working employee. Nothing more, nothing less. Michael let out a slow breath, but his heart was still racing. You see, officers, he said gently, I told you. I only came early because today means everything to me. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. The officers nodded, clearly believing him now. One of them even offered a small smile. We understand, sir. You're fine. No law was broken. You have every right to be here. Karen, however, could not accept her mistake so easily. She cleared her throat, trying to recover. Well, how was I supposed to know? People come and go at odd hours. I was only protecting the community. But her voice lacked the confidence it had earlier. Her eyes darted nervously, and for the first time, she seemed unsure of herself. Robert, the security guard, shook his head slowly. Karen, you've known Michael for years. He passes this building every morning. You see him almost daily. Why would you assume the worst of him? Karen didn't reply. She looked down at her shoes, folding her arms tightly. Michael wanted to be angry, but instead, he felt something else: sadness. It hurt to think that someone who lived near him, someone who saw him every day, could so easily doubt his character. He had always believed that neighbors were meant to look out for each other, not drag each other into trouble. One of the officers spoke again, this time in a softer tone. Sir, you're free to continue your work. And ma'am, he added, turning toward Karen, please be careful before making such serious calls. False alarms can waste time and resources. Karen nodded faintly, but her cheeks burned red. As the officers left, Michael gathered his papers and placed them carefully back into the briefcase. His fingers still shook slightly, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had to focus. His presentation was in just a few hours, and he couldn't let this distraction ruin his chance. But as he stepped toward the elevator, Karen suddenly spoke, her voice softer than before. "Michael, wait." He turned, his brows raised. Karen's usual sternness was gone. Instead, she looked troubled, almost guilty. I thought I was doing the right thing." I didn't realize her words stumbled, and she stopped mid-sentence. Michael didn't reply at first. He simply looked at her, his expression a mix of disappointment and exhaustion. Finally, he said, "Karen, sometimes protecting people means trusting them too. Not everyone is out to do harm." His words were simple, but they carried weight. Karen lowered her head, unable to meet his eyes. Michael stepped into the elevator, the doors closing slowly. Inside, he leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. His mind replayed the last 20 minutes like a storm. A false accusation, police officers, and Karen's suspicious eyes. It was almost too much to process. But he reminded himself why he was there. This day was about his dream, his hard work, his future. When he reached his office floor, he set his briefcase on the desk and opened it again. He spread out the files, the charts, and the notes he had prepared. The sight of them gave him strength. These papers represented months of dedication. This was what mattered, not Karen's doubts, not the fear of what had just happened. Still, deep inside, Michael couldn't shake off the image of Karen's frozen expression when she saw his work inside the briefcase. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was something else, something like recognition. As if the words on his papers had meant more to her than she had admitted. Why had she looked so shocked? Why had she gone silent so suddenly? Michael brushed the thought aside for the moment. He had a presentation to prepare for. Yet a quiet unease settled in his chest. He couldn't help but feel that the morning incident was not completely over. Something about Karen's reaction hinted at a deeper story, something he had yet to discover. Outside, Karen walked slowly back to her house. Her proud steps were gone, replaced by heavy, thoughtful ones. The image of the papers in Michael's briefcase stayed in her mind. She had seen a name, a plan, a title, something she never expected. And it connected to a past she had long tried to forget. For the first time in years, Karen felt fear not of Michael, but of what his success might uncover. The morning at the office moved quickly, but Michael found it difficult to focus. His eyes stayed fixed on the slides of his presentation, yet his mind kept wandering back to the lobby scene. The sound of the police siren, the sharp tone of Karen's voice, and most of all, the strange way she froze after seeing the papers, it all replayed in his head. He tried to convince himself that it was nothing, that Karen was simply embarrassed after being proven wrong. But deep down, Michael sensed there was more. As the clock ticked toward the presentation hour, Linda, one of his colleagues, walked in. She noticed the tension in Michael's face and frowned. "You look nervous," she said kindly. "Don't worry, you've worked hard for this. You'll do great." Michael smiled faintly, trying to hide the heaviness in his heart. "Thanks, Linda. I just had a strange morning." Linda tilted her head. "Strange how?" Michael hesitated but decided not to go into detail. "Let's just say, sometimes people misunderstand you, even when you've done nothing wrong." Linda gave a supportive nod. "That happens. But remember, today is about your work, not about anyone else's opinion." Her words gave him a little comfort, and soon it was time for the big meeting. The board members gathered in the conference room, their eyes fixed on him as he began his presentation. Michael spoke with steady confidence, explaining his ideas for the company's future growth. He showed charts of potential markets, graphs of increasing demand, and a careful step-by-step plan. His voice grew stronger with each slide, his earlier worries fading into the background. By the time he finished, the room was quiet. Then, one of the senior members, Mr. Thomas, clapped his hands slowly. The others followed. A smile spread across Michael's face as relief washed over him. He had done it. "Excellent work, Michael," Mr. Thomas said warmly. "This is exactly the direction we need. We'll review the details further, but I can say with confidence you've made an impact today." Michael thanked them, and for a moment, all seemed well. But as he packed up his files, he noticed something that unsettled him again. Karen's reaction to his papers flashed in his memory. She hadn't just been embarrassed. She had been startled, deeply startled. Later that evening, as Michael walked home, the sky painted itself with shades of orange and gold. Yet the peaceful sunset did little to calm him. He glanced at Karen's house as he passed by. Her curtains were drawn, but he could see a light glowing inside. For a brief second, he wondered if he should knock on her door and ask why she had reacted the way she did. But then he shook his head. "It's none of my business," he whispered to himself. Still, the feeling lingered. Meanwhile, inside her house, Karen sat by the window, staring at nothing in particular. Her mind was restless. She replayed the sight of the folder in Michael's briefcase, the bold words on the cover page. She had recognized a name printed inside, a name she thought she would never see again. Years ago, Karen had worked for a different company, one that had faced a huge downfall. At the heart of it was a project she had once been part of. The failure had not only ruined her career but also left her with a burden of shame she never discussed with anyone. And now, in Michael's papers, she had seen that very project mentioned again, rebuilt, redesigned, and prepared for success. Her chest tightened as old memories resurfaced. She had lost friends, trust, and opportunities because of that one disaster. And here was Michael, unknowingly stepping into the same plan, presenting it as something new. No wonder it looked so familiar, she whispered to herself. It's the same foundation, the same dream. But what if it fails again? Karen's emotions were mixed: fear, guilt, and an unexpected hint of jealousy. Michael was doing what she could not. He was bringing back something she had once believed in, something that had slipped through her fingers long ago. For the first time in years, Karen felt torn. Should she warn him? Should she tell him about the risks and mistakes of the past? Or should she stay silent, letting him discover the truth on his own? Back in his apartment, Michael sat by his desk, reviewing the positive comments he had received from the board. A smile touched his lips, but it quickly faded. He couldn't stop thinking of Karen. He didn't know her well, yet her reaction to his briefcase kept pulling at his thoughts. He leaned back in his chair and whispered to himself, what did she see that shocked her so much? That night, as the city settled into quiet, both Michael and Karen lay awake in their separate homes, troubled by the same set of papers that held not just numbers and charts, but hidden connections to a past neither of them could escape. And though neither of them realized it yet, their paths were about to cross again in ways that would change both their lives forever. The next morning began like any other. The streets buzzed with traffic, people hurried to work, and the sun stretched its light across the city. Yet for Michael, the weight of yesterday's events stayed heavy on his shoulders. He had impressed the board, yes, but his thoughts kept circling back to Karen. Her face when she saw his papers, shocked, pale, almost frightened, wouldn't leave his mind. He had tried to bury the memory under his success, but it kept returning like an echo he couldn't ignore. At the office, Linda noticed his distracted mood again. "You're still thinking about something," she said, placing a cup of tea on his desk. "What is it, Michael? You should be celebrating, not worrying." Michael sighed. "Do you remember my neighbor, Karen? She called the police on me yesterday, thinking I was trespassing. When she saw my briefcase, her whole face changed. It wasn't just embarrassment, Linda. It was like she recognized something in my work. Something that scared her." Linda raised her brows. "Are you saying she knew about your project?" "I don't know," Michael admitted, rubbing his forehead. "But the way she froze, it wasn't normal. It was almost like she had a history with it." Linda leaned closer. "Maybe you should talk to her. Sometimes, answers don't come unless you ask." Michael hesitated. Part of him wanted to ignore Karen entirely, to leave her in her world of complaints and suspicions. But another part of him knew Linda was right. If Karen truly recognized his work, then she might know something important. Something he couldn't afford to miss. That evening, after finishing his office duties, Michael stood outside Karen's house. The sky was painted with soft pink clouds, and the quiet of the neighborhood felt heavier than usual. For a long moment, he debated whether to knock. His hand hovered over the door, uncertain. Finally, he took a breath and tapped gently. The door opened slowly. Karen appeared, her expression cautious. She wasn't her usual confident self, instead, she looked uneasy, almost nervous. "Michael," she said softly, "I didn't expect you." "I know," Michael replied, keeping his voice calm. "But I think we need to talk." Karen's eyes shifted away, but after a pause, she stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, her home was tidy, filled with bookshelves, family photographs, and neatly arranged furniture. Michael sat on the sofa while Karen poured him a glass of water. Silence filled the room until Michael finally spoke. "Karen, I need to ask you something. Yesterday, when you looked inside my briefcase, you froze. It wasn't just about me coming early, was it? You recognized something. What was it?" Karen placed the glass on the table and sat down across from him. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, with a deep breath, she began. "Years ago," she said slowly, "I worked for a company called Green Tech Innovations. We had a plan very similar to the one you presented yesterday. Expansion, sustainability, long-term growth. It was ambitious, and for a time, it looked like it would change everything. But in the end, it collapsed. Mistakes were made, money was lost, and good people lost their jobs. I was one of them." Michael listened closely, his chest tightening as he realized the weight of her words. Karen continued, her voice tinged with regret. "When I saw your folder, I recognized some of the same ideas, the same foundation. It wasn't your fault, you couldn't have known. But seeing it brought everything back. The failure, the shame, the way my career ended because of it. That's why I froze." Michael sat in silence for a moment. Suddenly, her behavior made sense. She hadn't just been suspicious, she had been reminded of a painful past. "I'm sorry," Michael said softly. "I didn't know." Karen nodded faintly. "Of course, you didn't. And maybe your plan will succeed where ours failed. Maybe you'll achieve what I couldn't. But, Michael," her eyes lifted to his, filled with worry. Be careful. Ambition can blind people. We thought we had everything figured out, but we missed the risks. I don't want you to go through what I did. Her honesty surprised Michael. For the first time, he saw not the strict, judgmental neighbor, but a woman who had lived through disappointment and carried its scars quietly. Thank you for telling me, Michael said sincerely. I'll be careful. But I believe this time can be different. Karen gave a small, tired smile. I hope so. As Michael left her house that night, the air felt different. He understood her now, at least a little. She wasn't just the neighbor who complained about everything. She was someone shaped by her past, by losses she couldn't forget. Yet her warning lingered in his mind. Could history really repeat itself? Could his dream turn into the same kind of downfall Karen had experienced? Michael walked home under the dim streetlights, the briefcase in his hand feeling heavier than before. He wanted to believe in his future, but Karen's words echoed like a shadow, ambition can blind people. The next few days passed quickly for Michael, but Karen's words kept echoing in his mind. Even as his colleagues congratulated him and the board praised his ideas, a quiet doubt lingered inside him. He had built his plan with confidence, but now he wondered, had he missed something important? Was there a risk hiding between the numbers, just as Karen had warned? One evening, after everyone else had left the office, Michael stayed behind. The quiet hum of the air conditioner was the only sound in the room. He spread his papers across the long table, his eyes scanning every page. At first, everything looked strong: the graphs, the cost analysis, the projections. But then, he noticed small details he had ignored before. A tiny note on one chart: expected growth depends on steady supplier costs. Another line in a report: risk level, moderate to high in unstable markets. Michael's fingers tightened around the pages. He had seen those notes before, but in his excitement, he had brushed them aside. Now, with Karen's story fresh in his mind, they stood out like warning signs. Was I too confident? He whispered to himself. The door creaked open, and Linda stepped in. She was holding her bag, ready to go home, but when she saw Michael still working, she stopped. You're still here? It's late, Michael. He looked up, his face tired. I'm checking the plan again. Karen told me something about a similar project that failed years ago. I keep thinking, what if I've made the same mistakes? Linda walked closer and placed a hand on his shoulder. Every plan has risks. But that doesn't mean it will fail. You've done more research than anyone I know. Don't let one person's past shake your confidence. Michael nodded slowly, though his heart remained uneasy. Maybe you're right. But I can't shake the feeling that she knows something I don't. The next morning, Michael carried his briefcase to work with heavy steps. His meeting with the board had been successful, but now came the harder part: turning the plan into action. Contracts, suppliers, and partners needed to be confirmed. One mistake, and everything could collapse. As he walked past Karen's house, he saw her standing by the garden, watering the plants. Their eyes met briefly. She gave him a small nod, different from her usual sternness. Almost as if she was silently saying, "Be careful." Michael considered stopping to speak with her again, but he decided against it. He couldn't show the board that he was unsure. He had to move forward. Later that week, a board review meeting was scheduled. Michael presented updates, and everything seemed to go smoothly until one of the senior members, Mr. Davis, raised a question. "Michael," Davis said, adjusting his glasses, Your supplier costs are based on stable pricing. What if there's a sudden increase in the next quarter? Do we have a backup? Michael froze for a second. That same concern had been in the tiny notes he had reviewed. He had no clear backup plan yet. He opened his mouth, trying to sound confident. I believe the market will remain stable, sir. We've analyzed trends that suggest prices won't shift drastically. But Davis didn't look convinced. He nodded slowly, his face thoughtful. Just be cautious. We've seen good projects fall apart because of small details like this. Michael forced a smile, but inside, his chest tightened. Davis's words were almost the same as Karen's. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He paced around his apartment, his briefcase open on the table. Papers scattered across the floor as he reread them over and over. His success now felt fragile, like glass that could shatter at any second. Finally, he sat down and buried his face in his hands. I can't let this fail, he whispered. Not after everything. Meanwhile, across the street, Karen sat by her window, watching the lights in Michael's apartment flicker late into the night. She could see his shadow moving back and forth, restless, just as she had once been years ago when her own project had begun to crumble. Her heart ached with a mix of emotions: sympathy, regret, and a quiet guilt she had carried for too long. She had once been in his shoes, full of hope, only to watch it collapse. And now she wondered if she should step in before it was too late. The next morning, Michael received an envelope at his desk. It had no name, only his address written in neat handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. History has a way of repeating itself if you don't learn from it. Meet me this evening. We need to talk. The signature at the bottom was simple, Karen. Michael stared at the letter, his heart beating faster. Whatever she had to say, it was clear this story wasn't finished yet. The letter stayed in Michael's hands for a long time. He read it once, twice, then a third time. Karen wanted to meet. His first thought was suspicion. Why now? But then he remembered her words, the warning in her voice, and the sadness in her eyes when she spoke of the past. Perhaps she carried truths he needed to hear. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Michael walked toward Karen's house. The street was quiet, and the air carried the smell of freshly cut grass. He hesitated at her gate for a moment before knocking softly. The door opened, and Karen stood there, her expression serious but calm. Come in, she said simply. Inside, the atmosphere felt heavier than before. Karen guided him to the dining table, where several old folders and documents were spread out. The edges of the papers were yellowed, the ink slightly faded. I didn't plan on telling you all this, Karen began, her voice steady. But when I saw your project, I realized you deserved to know the truth. Maybe it will help you avoid what I couldn't. Michael sat down, his eyes scanning the papers. He saw familiar charts, cost projections, and diagrams. They looked strikingly similar to the ones in his own briefcase. This is the same model, Michael whispered. Karen nodded slowly. Yes. Green tech innovations. We dreamed of changing the industry. We had investors, media attention, and high hopes. But we missed something small that became something big. Her fingers traced one of the charts as she continued. Supplier costs went up suddenly. We didn't have a backup plan. Contracts fell through. We borrowed money to keep it alive, but the debt grew heavier. People lost faith. And in the end, the company collapsed. Michael leaned back, his throat dry. That's the same concern the board raised yesterday. The supplier costs, exactly, Karen said. I saw it in your plan, Michael. That's why I froze. I don't want you to repeat our mistake. Michael stared at her, torn between gratitude and frustration. Gratitude, because she was warning him. Frustration, because his dream suddenly seemed fragile, hanging by a single thread. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? He asked quietly. Karen lowered her gaze. Because I was ashamed. I lost everything because of that project. My job, my confidence, even some of my friendships. For years, I carried the weight of failure. When I saw you carrying something so similar, I didn't know how to react. My first instinct was to push you away, even to doubt you. But that wasn't fair to you. Michael softened at her honesty. For the first time, he saw her not as the strict neighbor, but as a woman who had been broken once and had spent years hiding her scars. Karen, he said, his voice gentle, thank you for telling me this. It must have been hard. She gave a faint smile. Hard, yes. But necessary. I couldn't watch someone else go down the same road. Especially not you. The two sat in silence for a while, the ticking of the clock filling the room. Finally, Michael spoke again. Then help me. Show me what mistakes to avoid. If you know where the cracks were, maybe we can make this stronger together. Karen blinked, surprised. You'd want my help? After everything. Why not? Michael replied. You have experience painful, yes, but valuable. You know the pitfalls better than anyone. I'd be foolish not to listen. For the first time in years, Karen's eyes brightened. Maybe this is my chance to make things right, she murmured. Over the next hour, they went through the documents side by side. Karen pointed out the weak points, the areas where overconfidence had blinded her old team. Michael took notes, comparing them with his own files. Slowly, a picture formed, one of risks, yes, but also of opportunities. By the time Michael left her house, the night sky was filled with stars. He felt lighter, though not because the problems were solved. It was because he no longer carried the burden alone. As he walked back to his apartment, he whispered to himself, this isn't just my fight anymore. We're in this together. Across the street, Karen stood by her window, watching him go. For years, she had kept her past locked away, afraid of facing it. But now, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: hope. Yet both of them knew the road ahead would not be easy. Challenges were waiting, and the cracks in the plan could still grow if ignored. But with the truth revealed and an unexpected partnership forming, there was finally a chance to build something stronger than before. And deep down, Michael sensed that Karen's role in his journey had only just begun. The morning sun spilled golden light across the city as Michael entered the office with a renewed sense of purpose. The past few days had been intense reviews, late nights, and Karen's revelations, but now he felt ready. He had seen the risks, understood the weak points, and, most importantly, had a guide to navigate them. Karen had agreed to work with him as a consultant, not officially, but her advice was invaluable. She had spent the previous evening helping him revise supplier contracts, adjust cost projections, and create a backup plan for unexpected setbacks. Michael's briefcase, once a symbol of anxiety, now felt like a toolkit for success. As he walked through the lobby, he saw Robert, the security guard, giving him a friendly nod. Even Robert seemed to notice a change in Michael's demeanor: calm, confident, and more focused than ever. Michael paused for a moment, thinking about the incident with Karen calling the police. He had almost let anger take over, but now he saw it differently. That morning, Karen's fear had come from a place of experience, not malice. In a strange way, that mistake had led to this partnership, to the insights he now carried. He headed straight to his office, where Linda was already waiting, her eyes lighting up as she saw him. "You look different today," she said. "More grounded." Michael smiled. "I feel different. Karen helped me see things I couldn't see on my own. She's teaching me how to avoid mistakes before they happen." Linda nodded. "Then let's get to work. The board will want updates soon." Michael spent the next few hours reviewing his updated plan. He double-checked every chart, confirmed supplier agreements, and rehearsed his presentation with new confidence. When he finally presented it to the board again, his voice was steady, his explanations clear, and every potential risk had a solution. The board members listened intently, asking questions, and Michael answered each one thoughtfully. He could feel the difference. His approach was stronger, more complete, and more realistic than ever before. By the end, the senior members were nodding in approval, and Mr. Thomas smiled warmly. "Michael," Mr. Thomas said, "this revised plan is excellent. You've anticipated challenges we didn't even consider. It shows foresight and responsibility. Well done." A wave of relief washed over Michael. He had not only kept his project alive but had strengthened it. And deep down, he knew he couldn't have done it without Karen's guidance. Later that afternoon, he walked home, briefcase in hand, thinking about the journey. He paused outside Karen's house, smiling to himself. For weeks, she had seemed like the strict, complaining neighbor. Now, she was someone he respected deeply, someone who had faced failure and used that experience to help him succeed. He knocked gently. The door opened, and Karen stood there, holding a cup of tea. Her eyes were soft, her expression calm. "You look tired," she said, "but happy." "I am," Michael replied. "Thank you, for everything. I don't know what I would have done without your advice." Karen smiled faintly. "You've done all the work, Michael. I just reminded you of what I already learned the hard way. You've earned this." They stood together in silence for a moment, the tension of the past weeks dissolving into a quiet understanding. It was strange how events had unfolded, how a false accusation, fear, and misunderstanding had led to mutual trust and collaboration. "Michael," Karen said softly, "I want you to know, you don't have to go through this alone. You can ask for help, and it's okay to rely on someone else sometimes. I've learned that too late, but you don't have to." Michael nodded. "I understand. And I promise, I won't forget it." Across the street, the city buzzed with life, but here, in this quiet moment, two people shared a bond built on respect, honesty, and lessons from the past. Michael realized that the morning incident with the police, Karen's frozen stare at his briefcase, and the secrets she had revealed, all of it had shaped him into a better person, a better professional, and someone ready to face challenges with wisdom. The days that followed were smoother. Michael implemented his revised plan, the company saw growth, and his reputation as a thoughtful and prepared employee strengthened. Karen continued to provide guidance quietly, their partnership built on mutual trust and shared experiences. And sometimes, when Michael walked past her house in the early morning, he would smile at her, remembering how a small misunderstanding the morning she called the police had led to a journey neither of them could have predicted. In the end, Michael learned that success was not just about ambition or hard work, it was also about listening, trusting others, and learning from the past. And Karen learned that sharing her experience could help someone else achieve what she once could not. Together, they had turned fear and failure into a new beginning.